Thanks, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining the webinar, Driving Compliant Reach in Healthcare, Unlocking the Power of PurpleLab and Comscore Predictive Audiences. I'm Brett Chachko, and my role at Throtle is Vice President of Business Development. And over the next 30 minutes, we're going to explore how healthcare marketers can balance compliance with scale, extend reach across leading platforms, and leverage predictive audiences to drive smarter, more effective campaigns. And also at the end of the webinar, we've carved out time for Q&A. So please, at any time, feel free to submit questions through the Q&A option in Zoom. Joining us today are Scott Renee, VP of Advertising Sales at PurpleLab, and Becca Forster-Marco, VP of Emerging Solutions at Comscore. Becca and Scott, could you please introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first, Beck. Does that work for you? Okay. Thanks, Brett, for the intro. I appreciate it. I'm really excited, obviously, about the chance to be a part of this session with Throtle and Comscore. The world of healthcare advertising, we are kind of talking about this just before we started here, is complex, nuanced, sometimes maddening. I think we can all agree. But the more the ecosystem works together to help our advertisers, navigate that complexity, the more we all win. And quite frankly, I'll get into this more as the session progresses, but we all need to be focused on helping patients and healthcare providers, win, right? And so we're all in the business, in my view, of helping patients become more educated, and aware of their therapy and treatment options. Full stop. That's really our mission here. So with that said, I did want to help everybody understand what PurpleLab's business is. So I'll start there, just kind of set the foundation for the rest of the talk track here. So PurpleLab, at our core is we're a healthcare data aggregator and organizer, right? We have the largest footprint in healthcare data in the industry. We see over 11 billion claims events annually, both pharmacy and medical. Basically covering the entirety of the U.S. population. We have data on over 3 million opted-in HCPs or healthcare providers in our data set as well. And by the way, the patient level data comes to us, de-identified. We work with a company called Datavant. I think most of the people maybe listening in on this call know who Datavant is, but essentially it allows us to properly de-identify all the data before it hits our servers to ensure, HIPAA compliance, right? And we organize all that data from our suppliers, and make it available through a platform called Health Nexus. And we also enable our data and access to that data through our platform partners, and service essentially four different constituent buyers, right? So first, we have a business that sells platform and data access to pharma and life sciences, right? And so when they want to do research for a particular therapeutic area, or they want to do some strategy around commercial, like who do they target? What are the prescribing habits? What patients might be willing to switch and why? Market sizing and segmentation, forecasting. And oh, by the way, media investment strategy, measurement, and activation, which we're going to talk about here as well. We also sell data and platform access to payers, right? So they can do like research around digital health and the effectiveness of that, and help them establish premiums and enrollment strategies. We also work with providers like patient journey studies, episodes of care studies, but then we get into the advertising side of the business. On the PurpleLab side, it's our fastest growing segment of our business, and we have effectively two different go-to-market teams on our advertising business. One, we sell audiences to agencies and to brands directly, and we deploy those audiences through the entirety of the omni-channel advertising ecosystem. Business is growing very, very nicely. I'm really excited about that. And then the other thing that we do on the go-to-market side is we embed our data and our platforms into the advertising ad tech ecosystem stack, so they can deploy compliant measurement, targeting, and planning inside of their platforms. So we want to make sure that we enable the entirety of the ecosystem so they can compliantly do advertising in healthcare as well. So that's a high-level review of the PurpleLab business, and I'll hand the mic over to Becca to give you some to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. Well, I am also very excited to be here and really looking forward to diving in today. So I work at a company called Comscore, but specifically I work on the programmatic division, which is called Proximic by Comscore. And we offer targeting solutions that are built on the principles of a lot of what Scott and Brett have already been talking about: privacy, scale, and precision. And these targeting solutions are powered by our own data assets. And we also have an AI contextual engine that does enable buyers and sellers to maximize the scale and performance of their campaigns. And so our solution today, we're going to be talking about a lot of our ID-less audiences. We also have an ID-based business because we truly believe in that hybrid approach, which is required now in order to reach that full breadth of the audience for your campaign. So really excited to be here and excited to dive in. So I'll turn it back over to Brett, I think.
Wonderful. Thanks both. All right. So in this session, we're going to cover three key objectives: how advertisers can compliantly achieve accurate addressability amid a fast-changing privacy landscape without the need for ID-based audiences, how Proximic by Comscore's predictive audiences enable a greater reach and scale, especially when compared to traditional audience targeting methods, and why PurpleLab's audience data is ideal for feeding the predictive models. And eventually, I'll quickly touch on why Throtle is moderating a webinar about PurpleLab and Comscore. But first, let's start with the seed data that makes these models possible, and kick it over to Scott.
Yeah, thanks again, Brett. So, I had mentioned this in my earlier talk track. Obviously we spend a lot of time, energy, and resource. It's actually the largest part of our business in terms of investment is getting and aggregating all the seed data on essentially the U.S. population. And from our standpoint, like it serves as the foundation for us to not only build very robust modeled segments that are ID based, right? And we'll talk more about that here in a minute. But it also offers us the ability to be able to link it with contextual data, behavioral data that's not ID based, right? Which we're going to talk about here with Becca. But really, that big data marketplace is the foundation for building the right audiences, accurate audiences, and ones that are high performing. And then, so one of the things I wanted to do as well is kind of give everybody an understanding of like how an audience is built at PurpleLab, just to sort of set the foundation for what Becca is going to talk about in the next slide. So let's say a life science company is selling a medication for eczema, right? So let's just say it's Regeneron, right? Like everybody knows maybe that medication, right? So their agency would come to us and say, hey, we want an eczema segment. And on our side, well, we have both self-service tools, and custom building audience tools, but we would build what's called a concept group, right? So effectively, it's like, give me all the de-identified IDs of people diagnosed with eczema, right? And so we take that concept group, and let's just say it's 10 million people, right? And then we'd run that concept group through our proprietary modeling process and build a model that we would then apply to an opted-in marketing universe, right? And produce a segment of IDs, right? IDs that can be compliantly targeted. So effectively, this is a HIPAA compliant process that gets us to a list of IDs that help the agency or the brand maximize their media spend and minimize waste, right? And so those, like I mentioned before, those segments can be virtually activated anywhere within the ad tech ecosystem. But there's a challenge, right? And a gap. And this is where Becca is going to help us understand how we can take ID-less solutions that are contextual based and try to fill those gaps. So I'll turn that over to Becca.
Sure. So there is a challenge, right? There is a gap. And part of that has to do with the privacy laws that are coming out fast and furious and trying to keep ahead of every law in every state. And there are differences, right, among the states. And so if you have a national campaign or even a regional campaign, or even one that happens to be in a local market that crosses state lines, right, at the same time that you are managing the campaign, you also need to be aware that of all the different laws and ensure compliance. And it's tough, right? It presents a challenge as you are trying to deliver the campaign. And so that's why we really like this identity-free option, because it allows you to take the ID-based solution as well as the ID-free solution as a necessary complement to deliver those consistent results. And the ID-free solution, right, this contextual solution is what we are going to talk about today. So on the next slide, we're going to dive a little bit into the solution, right? Because in addition to the privacy concerns, Not all of the inventory that's available to you is reachable via an ID, whether it's an actual like made or an alternative ID. So it means it kind of makes it impossible to fully reach that audience with an ID-based strategy alone. And so at Proximic, right, we're all about, and again, I also talked about this at the top, is that we believe the future of scalable advertising does require that hybrid approach where you are seamlessly integrating an ID-based target as well as an ID-free solution to ensure consistent reach and performance. And this is exactly why the three companies here on the call have partnered together, right? Because we have PurpleLab's data asset, right, which Scott just talked to you about, HIPAA compliant, meeting all those standards. We have our predictive modeling, which we'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide, and then Throtle's identity expertise. And with those three in partnership, we've brought to market over 300 of PurpleLab's audiences across conditions, medication, and tests. And so what this unlocks for you is the ability to actually utilize that hybrid approach. So if you're using a PurpleLab ID-based segment today, there is probably an ID-free contextual solution you can add to your campaign to ensure that not only is your campaign continues to be privacy compliant, right, in that targeting, but also delivers consistent performance across state lines. So you may be wondering, okay, Becca, you're talking about predictive audiences. What does that mean and how is that different from an ID-based solution? So on the next slide here, we're going to talk about it and break it down into the three components about how we create these predictive audiences. And the first step here is data matching, right? So in this example, we have a sports injury segment from PurpleLab that has been matched to Comscore's consented panel, right? So the first thing is straight up data matching, probably somewhat all familiar with that. So once we have those panelists in our panel, what we do is we use a sophisticated AI and machine learning algorithm to identify the high propensity content topics based on behavioral patterns identified for those matched panelists. So said another way, we are finding the content categories of which people that are defined as having or interested in sports injury, whether they had one, they may have one in the future, they always have one, right? Any of those kind of defined, and trying to understand what type of content categories they consume. And because we here at Comscore have a 360-degree view of our panelists, it enables us to link those behaviors and patterns to content consumption that are not necessarily intuitive on the surface, opening up opportunities to engage with those consumers outside of endemic content, right? So this is part of that reach extension where through this process, we are identifying things that may not be intuitive based on the patterns that we're seeing from our methodology here. So for example, right, taking the sports industry segment, we see that they have a high propensity to be interested in fantasy sports, the media industry, and also mathematics, okay? So once we know that, right, once we've identified those relevant content topics pertaining to that sports injury segment, of course, in this example, we use that data to predict and flag relevant inventory across digital devices, including audio, CTV, PC, and mobile, that are likely to attract that audience. So in this example, right, because sports industry individuals were flagged for the media industry, if there is an inventory available on Entertainment Daily, that may be flagged and thus a pain reliever may be displayed on that site. So it really is taking that reach and allowing you to go beyond the ID, right? And reach those content categories that are also going to be receptive to your message. And so what does that actually open up for advertisers? So on the next slide here, right, it allows you to have consistent performance that unlocks previously unreachable audiences across all 50 states and across all digital platforms. So desktop, mobile, CTV, and audio. And these segments can be found generally wherever you do your inventory management today. They are off the shelf right now today within Trade Desk and Xandr, and then they can be pushed to any other DSP via PMP deal. But of course, none of this is possible without a strong identity spine, and that's where Throtle comes in. So I'm going to turn it over to Brett to give us some more insight there.
Thanks, Becca. All right. So when the goal is improving patient outcomes, accuracy is paramount, right? A healthcare marketer's primary concern is to ensure the right people will be reached with the right message. And while ID-based audiences, think cookies, mobile devices, IP address, TV sets, are traditionally thought of as the most accurate way to reach the right patient populations at scale, it's really important to highlight that according to the IAB, over 50% of programmatic inventory is not accessible via ID-based targeting, significantly limiting how many people can be effectively reached with a targeted message. So one of the major benefits of predictive audiences is that they allow marketers to access more right moments by tapping into the ad inventory that ID-based audiences simply cannot reach, and it allows them to do so compliantly and in a non-intrusive way. So what are some of the factors we need to consider on the compliance side? Privacy regulations. They're in place to ensure the protection of people's privacy. The name of the game here is trust, and when working with audiences designed for the healthcare vertical, we have to go to extra lengths for to both protect data and to give consumers a choice. So consent strings and website opt-outs, they allow for transparency. ID-free segments enable the do not sell compliance, and they support really a lawful basis for processing the data to adhere to CCPA, CPRA, and GDPR regulations. HIPAA ensures claims data stays de-identified and is obviously applicable here. So, Scott, with your background in role at PurpleLab, I'm wondering if you could talk to HIPAA processes like expert determination or anything else it takes to stay compliant.
Yeah. I mean, actually, maybe we can patch in Stephen Aroyan here, who works for DataVent and represents that side of the ecosystem. From our standpoint, like it's really important to maintain compliance, and whenever you have a health data set that's been aggregated and brought together, what you do is this whole process called expert determination, which looks at all the different fields in our data set, looks at the fill rate for all the fields that are in the data set, and identifies areas where there might be concern where if the data set gets out into the wild or it gets into the hands of a bad actor, that there could be a re-identification event that's potentially going to happen. And so all the certifications do and all the ways in which we work with the ecosystem ensures that this expert determination work is the foundation of what happens when data is moved from platform to platform, from brand to agency and so forth, to ensure compliance. So there's this expert determination step that goes along with it all along the way to ensure that we're not putting the data at risk and making sure that there's no chance of a re-identification event. So that's kind of my take on it.
I mean, it's super relevant to all of us, right? Because we're all technically patients. So I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking that it's comforting to hear the extent that covered entities and business associates have to go through to ensure de-identified health data cannot be re-identified.
One of those things that I started jumping in, but like as an example, if you have a segment of people for that eczema campaign as an example, and you want to send it out for activation, and let's just say you want to include some geographic criteria in your segmentation. Maybe you want to target somebody in a particular zip code. Well, what happens if that zip code is rural, right? It has 3 people in it, right? Well, you can't send that data along because there's potential for a re-identification event. So you have to, retract that particular zip code so you can ensure compliance. So there's lots of complexity there, and obviously, like from an ecosystem standpoint, making sure that you're compliant all along the way helps us all out.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks. So on sensitive data handling, a really key benefit of this AI-driven contextual audience targeting is that it really minimizes exposure to sensitive data like PHI. PHI is protected health information. So less parties have to touch this data, therefore there's less likelihood of exposing it. And finally, even with all the checks and balances in place, it's also a best practice for companies like ours to use contractual safeguards like data protection agreements, which makes sure downstream platform partners won't share data appropriately. All right, and data governance. It's also really important. Strong data governance starts with establishing clear rules, like making sure data has role-based access and that audiences are only used for their intended purpose. We capture consent. We have to document all opt-ins and opt-outs, and we keep targeting transparent with user-facing notices when it comes to advertising. So AI and vendor oversight really means running bias and accuracy checks, do model validations and independent audits from outside parties. Third-party management talks to vendors should be implementing some kind of like standardized opt-out, whether it's API or not, and registries for data brokers. This helps make sure that the entire chain is compliant. And as the privacy landscape, it's continually evolving. This can't be a set it and forget it process. We have to perform privacy impact assessments, and we have to continue to track enforcement trends in ad tech, at least quarterly, just to ensure we stay aligned with evolving privacy laws. The payoff is privacy safe scale, it boosts ROI, and it strengthens consumer trust. Okay, so far we've highlighted compliance aspects and PurpleLab's audiences and what they do, and Comscore's content topics and Proximic's predictive tech. So at this point, you might be wondering where Throtle fits in the mix. Earlier, Becca walked us through the predictive model process, and the first step is data matching. PurpleLab segment data has to be matched to Comscore consented paddle data. So even when we're talking about de-identified data, identity-free, ID-free audiences, identity is required to crosswalk the two data sets. Why is that? It's because having a role when it comes to improving patient outcomes, again, ensuring accuracy is key. And equally as important to the quality of the seed audience itself, in this case, the PurpleLab data, only an accurate identity spine can preserve the quality of the audience when you map it to the content or contextual insights. So if probabilistic methodologies or probabilistic identity graphs are used during the crosswalk process, the predictive audiences and all the ads you serve against them are going to run a greater risk of reaching the wrong people. So as healthcare's only dedicated identity provider, Throtle's really uniquely suited to support this workflow due to privacy-first infrastructure, a decade of expertise in identity solutions, an identity graph built at the individual level, and compliant experts who are well-versed in state and federal laws and regulations for both healthcare and for privacy. It's actually, we're really proud to be the identity partner trusted to bridge these types of data between the health audiences and the contextual insights. So we're starting to wrap up. Let's review the key takeaways. The real advantage of these PurpleLab and Comscore audiences is that they bring together compliance, scale, and performance. By using de-identified privacy-safe data, you can be confident that you're activating audiences accurately and like within the confines of the law. So because those audiences extend across your leading DSPs and SSPs, and Becca, it was Trade Desk and Xandr, and then any other DSP via PMP?
Deal. Yeah, it's just a matter of whether it's like on the shelf, like someone could go and find it, or there it has to be pushed to their seat.
Got it. So you're not limited in reach.
No.
Not at all.
No.
So most importantly, these audiences deliver a proven impact in real-world campaigns. They give agencies and healthcare marketers today both confidence and the results that they need. In short, it's compliant, it's scalable, and it delivers results exactly what healthcare marketers want and need today. So with PurpleLab and Comscore, you don't have to choose between compliance and impact, you get both. And now, why don't we open up the floor to questions and answers and address anything that came through during the presentation. Scott and Becca, can you open this up?
Yeah, I addressed one of the questions was whether or not AI was a key proponent of our creating the predictive inventory, and it is a component, but I wouldn't say that it's key, just because we do use a lot of the underlying data asset, right, which is known versus AI modeling. So it is a component of it, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's key. I know it's a nuance there.
Yeah, actually, I see an anonymous user post a good question about being able to tie back,
Mm.
I guess, media impressions that are delivered against an ID-based solution versus one that's non-ID based. And that's a great question. I think the answer is that, from a measurement standpoint, obviously all the DSPs are tracking impressions. Impression log data is tied to, Trade Desk ID in many cases. If we have that Trade Desk ID and it's mapped to a Throtle ID, whether it's an impression delivered against a contextual audience or it's an impression delivered against an ID-based audience, it's still an impression that's tracked and can be linked back to a Throtle ID, which then can be measured. So I don't know if anybody else has any other comments around that, but to me, that's the answer to that question. Brett, any comments there?
Yeah, at the end of the day, the targeting isn't based off of an ID. The targeting is based off of content and context. But those ads are still being served on devices to people, so therefore they can be resolved back and measured.
Great question. I do also wanted to make a comment that, from my perspective, like many of our, agency and brand partners are saying, "Hey, PurpleLab guys, like we need more innovation. We have so much signal in your data set. Help us access more of this." And in many cases, like, on the ID front, on the real world data front, we have tons of new signal that we're starting to work with platforms to come up with new audience techniques. But to me, like all the signal that Comscore is tracking through all the inventory that they have relationships with, like to me, it's just it's the perfect complement, right? Where we can track people based on a condition, and obviously from a HIPAA compliance standpoint, we're forced to put a lot of I want to say noise, but a lot of things into these segments to ensure that they're compliant and they can't be tracked back to a unique individual. But then there's also signal outside of our sort of ID-based world that we need to tap into. And to me, it's like a perfect complement to get our impressions out to people and have it reduce waste in a way that maintains compliance. So I'm just really excited about the way that we can close the gap here. So anyway, any other questions here?
Not live.
Okay.
Okay. Well, for those who are still here, you could obviously connect with all of us on LinkedIn if you do have questions following up to the webinar. Um,
Yeah, if you've
let
got questions about any place for us to activate segments and how we measure and what is claims data? What does provider data look like? How IDs can be translated across the ecosystem. Like happy to help in any of those topics. Excited to
I was
help.
just about to plug you, Scott. So yes, you can reach out to Scott directly if you want to know how to get access to these audiences, wherever you're running your campaigns. And again, today you can find these audiences at the Trade Desk and Xandr. But if you have a PMP deal or a need at another audience, we can do direct pushes pretty much anywhere. So
Actually,
on that note,
there's a question
yeah.
up there. So the
Oh,
question is, who is the best to grade homework in terms of tracking conversions? And I guess the answer to me would be you have to make sure that you're working with the right identity provider, right? You have to make sure that you can take impressions and match them in a consistent and accurate way back to a data set that's compliant, right? So let's just say it's the health data set. So you have to make sure you're working with the right identity provider so you can make sure that there's an accurate representation of impressions back to the core data set. Um, and in terms of the data set, like it could be PurpleLab. There's others in the ecosystem as well that have claims data set. But as long as you feel comfortable that the backend claims data set is an accurate representation of what actually is happening. Let's just say it's pharmacy claims for prescriptions being filled or medical claims for prescriptions written. Like as long as you feel comfortable that that data is accurate, then like there could be lots of options in terms of like who's best. So identity and then backend data set, are those two sources accurate? Then I think you're in a good spot.
Is there anything, Scott, like non-tangible or I guess as an add-on that makes measurement or a measurement provider, I don't want to say the word better, but for lack of
Yeah.
a better word,
Scale. Yeah. I would say scale. Like if you know when you're out there looking for the right measurement provider, you have to look at claims data scale. If you have like a lot of scale, especially with pharmacy claims, and then you're going to be in a better position to understand like and fill the gaps where prescriptions were filled. Maybe you miss it with one provider, maybe you're going to see it with another. You want to have as much coverage there as possible to make sure that you're linking your media investment back to prescriptions that are being filled at the pharmacy.
Yeah, I will say that I can't speak intelligently to it, but it is a big part of the other side of Comscore's business from a custom research perspective. And we've been doing a lot of that for 10, 15 years. So I also think there's another couple avenues where the three of us may be working together to produce some things that I'm hearing rumblings about. So I do think I would agree with everything that Scott said, being in the measurement industry, we all do things a little differently. We're all not going to be perfect. And so it's just trying to find the best fit and what you all feel the most comfortable with. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to understand what the metrics mean. I was on a panel a couple weeks ago and I had a couple people come up to me because that's one of the things I talked about is like, okay, this is what the metric says and this is what it means for you. And they're like, oh my gosh, we just never ask our measurement provider. And I'm like, why not? Like that is their job, right? Is to make the data sing, to make it tell a story, to make it show you how it impacted your business and why. And so really hold them accountable to getting you the answers that you need that make sense.
Yeah. And then I'm seeing another question from
Yeah.
Steve. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Great to see your name. Looking forward to catching up here at Adweek in a few weeks. I would think, from my view, the question is, do you think more players will lean into the ID-less targeting sort of infrastructure? I mean, I do feel like this is like a growing trend that and obviously it's been, there's lots of contextual related avenues to go. We believe that, our partnership with Comscore is the best that's out there. I will say that in many cases, the whole notion of being able to work directly with the SSPs to target the inventory and be able to score the inventory is a way to not target one-to-one or based on IDs. I see like there's lots of interesting ways for us to go that direction. But I feel like it's just a smarter way to be able to maneuver around, maintain compliance, and maximize performance and get your ads in front of the right people because you need to reduce waste. And the more we can work together to try to figure out a way to reduce waste by doing things like this, I think the better off we're all going to be.
reduce waste and grab some of that, those audiences you actually just can't reach using IDs too. So I like that it's a hybrid approach because it embraces
Yeah.
both aspects of targeting people are used to, or those they're used to, and those maybe they don't do as much.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, from our perspective, I mean, the answer is yes. We do see more people leaning in, but they are leaning into the hybrid approach. They are not moving away from ID based. It is yes and right
Right.
from that improv. It is not one or the other. So I think that's where we see, and we're really excited about the momentum because it is a huge, huge story and something we really believe in. And what if you're working directly with a proximic client today, that is what we will recommend is generally a hybrid approach, almost always.
Great. And one other thing, New York, a couple weeks, Adweek, for people that are going to be out there, hit us
Yes.
up. We can talk more about this stuff. So
Yes.
Mhm.
Who wants another meeting? I do. I do.
coffees,
Uh,
lunches, happy hours, like the whole thing, right? That's what
Yeah.
that's the reason we do those trade shows is not to go walking booth to booth. It's to go have fun with the ecosystem and have a good time talking about ad tech stuff. So
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone for
Did
the
we get any
question.
more questions?
That's it.
that's it.
Stephen, thanks for that one. It was a good one. Um, I will be at Adweek too, so hopefully I'll see you there. All right, so let's wrap this up. Again, you can reach out to Scott directly if you'd like to gain access to these audiences. Um, We hope you found the presentation insightful and helpful. And thanks again for joining. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks,
See you,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye.